We have an international consultant in Sally. We have a meetings industry journalist who covers not just the original Scandinavia, but now affordable Scandinavia, and is well known for trying to blend a political recognition for our world in the full knowledge that, of the social impact as well as the economic impact. We have a Lithuanian economist, a free market economist, if I've read her CV correctly. I have to be very careful what I say here, because I read economics as well. We could find ourselves having a philosophical debate. And not least of all, we have a member of the Swedish coalition government with us as well. So if I could ask you all to take your seats on the panel, I'll do a proper introduction of each of you. I won't introduce Sally again, other than that you can see the depth of the work that she does. And I know she's found working in Estonia fascinating because having worked in all areas of Europe, I think she found what we would both call an emerging region of Europe fascinating. And incidentally, there are officially 105,000 towns and cities in Europe, and officially 500 regions within those countries of Europe, which, if you think it's a competitive market, think of those figures. Okay, let me do some introductions whilst our colleagues get mic'd up. I'm going to start with our Lithuanian guest, Ruth Vanienė. That's as good as it gets. Believe me, that took me 3 weeks of rehearsal. Very well known in Lithuania as an economist, who currently works as an independent policy analyst. For many years, she worked at the Lithuanian Free Market Institute, was a member of the board of the Bank of Lithuania, which I think was one of those banks that didn't make the European headline, so well done. Was an economic advisor to the mayor of Vilnius. Is that the current mayor or a former mayor? It's the current mayor.
The same, current.
Well, interestingly, I think
Yes.
this city has a truly dynamic mayor. You don't have to agree with his politics, but boy, does he get things done. And since 2010, Ruta has been a member of the board of the Lithuanian University of Health Sciences. I've never actually associated economics and health science in the same sentence, but hey-ho. Next to Ruta, we have Roger Kellerman, or Roger Kellerman, depending on your pronunciation, one of the more outspoken publishers in our world. Been around, and I know he doesn't mind me saying this because we've known each other a long time as well, as long as I have. I think you might look at either of us and think, oh God, they've been around for a very long time. But to many, he is the doyen of the Swedish meetings industry because of his commitment to what he's given the industry there. He created a Swedish Meetings Industry Week, where it brings the whole industry together. He supported the trade show sector in Sweden, trying to make sure that the meeting sector gets exposure. He created the Swedish Politicians Forum that brings those involved in politics generally within Sweden at state and at regional level together. And I know that Pernilla, our guest, has actually attended those. They've known each other for quite a long time. But also, Roger and his wife, Ati, give a great deal back to the industry. They get involved in European level debate and much wider debate. And if you haven't read their magazine, do so, because A, it's beautifully written, because it's not just about venues and destinations advertising their services. There's real intellectual depth to to management, communication in it. Often, the pieces in the magazine aren't about the meetings industry. They're about an academic subject which can be applied. Next to Roger is a very dear friend of mine, Pernilla Gunther, who is a member of the Christian Democrat Party in Sweden and of the coalition government. She's a former meeting planner, and that's how we met in Copenhagen in 1999. She was an active member of Meeting Professionals International, as I was. I was a new member in those days. And I met someone else that seemed to know a great deal about the industry, and I didn't seem to know anything. She serves on 2 of the committees in government and is actually been the voice within the Swedish Parliament on tourism and in particular the meetings industry. And she wrote a major debating paper last year or the year before, last year? It was last year, I think you showed it to me, to try and get members of Parliament discussing this growing economic sector which can be measured. But Pernilla has another story which she's given me permission to share with you because I believe this is an inspiring story. Pernilla has cheated death 4 times. 4 times. As a young woman, she got through major cancer, then a major brain issue, and 5 or 6 years ago, Pernilla, when we were due to meet at a conference, she said, "Paul, I can't attend, I've not been so well. I was rushed to hospital, which they thought was pneumonia, and a few days later, they transplanted my heart." Now you think, my God, this woman's gone through enough. Having got through the heart transplantation, she then contracted even worse cancer than she did before, with a major life-threatening operation. She then recovered from that. There's something in her DNA, I think. And then she stood for Parliament because she felt she wanted to give back. She felt, having cheated death so many times, it was about time she fulfilled her ambition to be in politics. And I actually find that quite an inspiring story. And that's sort of what she's going to talk about in this innovation session later this afternoon. But she's a meeting planner at heart because she was a meeting planner for a political party. So that's our panel. This is an experimental session because one of the reasons we're doing it is that we believe our world is important. We believe the business of meetings and events doesn't get recognition, and it largely doesn't. The world over, it's a struggle. But interestingly, with a whole range of studies, it's becoming recognised quite how important our world is in economic terms, in macroeconomic terms, in political terms, as the politicians, and not just the elected politicians, but the many civil servants that influence policy, write the briefing papers, begin to realise the issues of economic development, but also from a social impact, from an education, from a legacy point of view, from, as Sally refers to, a civic pride. What can we bring to our wider community through our work? The problems we face as an industry is that we've never really been equipped with data, never really been equipped with the intellectual argument. In the UK, some 30 universities, I think now, teach some form of business tourism or event management elements at higher education level, and some do full-time degrees in event management, including at master's level. But actually, that's a very patchy picture around Europe. But actually, do you think our politicians know that this is a growing academic environment? I wonder if any of us would doubt that information technology is an appropriate academic subject. I'm not sure too many people in 1945 thought it was an appropriate academic pursuit. Those arguments have gone away. What we have to do is equip ourselves to actually gain the champions and the funding and the resource support in order for us to develop our industry and be recognised as a profession in our own right. I'm going to just give you some interesting figures. I would do if I could just go back and get the piece of paper that I should be holding in my hands. And the figures are about economic benefit in a number of countries. And it doesn't matter in a way whether these countries are bigger or smaller than any of the countries represented in the room today. Because essentially the key messages are applying for a number of countries. A few years ago, a system was developed through the work of the United Nations World Tourism Organization of measuring the economic impact of the world of business and of meetings and events. And in broad terms, they use the system of national accounts through a particular satellite accounting technique. So it's now possible to measure the contribution at national GDP level of the world of business and events in the same way as it measures the output for automotive, for pharmaceutical, for agriculture and the like. It's as valid as that because it was invented by government statisticians and economists around the world. It's not us, it's not our people from our own industry doing it. Although a number of individuals sat on the UN committee to make sure the definitions and everything else was right. But here's some headlines. And these headlines are incredible. In Canada, the meetings industry generated 71 billion Canadian dollars in economic output from 673,000 meetings in a year involving 70 million delegates. It generated 14 billion Canadian dollars in taxation revenue, so at least the government accountants will take note, and created and maintained, and we have to think about this, 550,000 full-time jobs in Canada, which I think has a population of about 32 million, something like that. It's a very high percentage of their population, and actually, the world of meetings and events in Canada was worth more than forestry, if you think how much significance forestry gets in the headlines in Canada. In the USA, which is a study that followed that one, the gross economic impact, including indirect and what economists called induced economic impact, was 907 billion US dollars. And I always have to look at that figure and think it can't be true. 1.8 million meetings in a year, 205 million delegates. Now, these figures are incredibly large, and you're going to think, well, our countries are small. But these are relative figures. 25.6 billion US dollars in taxation. And this is the thing that gets me. The industry created and maintained 1.7 million jobs in the US, and the contribution at GDP level was larger than auto manufacturing in the US and sports, which is a major industry there. So relative to the things that grab the headlines in the States, all of a sudden our world becomes economically as important as automotive. Now, who would have thought that years ago? No one, because it's a traditional industry. But a bit closer to home, in my own country, the UK, study completed and published last year, 1.3 million meetings, and they claim there are 10,000 venues at the meetings where the meetings take place. Sally and I don't believe that figure is true, but it's many thousands nevertheless. Direct spending of 40 billion sterling and 56 billion direct economic impact, 423,000 full-time jobs directly, and overall, over 1 million jobs are dependent upon our world. Taxation, 21 billion. So all of a sudden, these figures are important. But even closer to home, 3 years ago, Denmark did their study, and this is Danish kroner, and in my head, I don't know how many Danish kroner there are to the pound. 187,000 meetings in a small country. 6.9 million delegates. Can you imagine if there were 6 million delegates coming into one of the Baltic states? That would be nice, wouldn't it, in a year? Double the population. Quite interesting figures. 4.7 billion Danish kroner in tax, 21 billion direct spend. Total jobs absolutely, unequivocally dependent upon our world in the meetings industry in Denmark, 38,000. Simply wouldn't exist. And it doesn't actually, it's not easy to get to the bottom of quite how many other jobs are dependent upon our world. What I'd now like to do, having just given you these massive headline figures, and we will make all these figures available to you. My figures got lost in the ether between the UK and Lithuania yesterday, or Sunday actually when I sent them. What I'm going to do is just ask two of our panel to say a few few words. I'm going to ask Sally to speak a bit more about the social side of the impact, the areas of civic legacy, the areas of education perhaps, but not just the economics. And then I'm going to ask Pernilla to talk about, very briefly, to talk about why she as a politician thinks our world should get more attention. And Pernilla works very closely with public servants, and often in these debates we forget about the role of the civil servant that finishes up writing briefing papers for the elected politicians and sometimes is an impenetrable forest that no one really understands. I think I should move because I think I might be in front of us. Then we're going to throw open the floor and Ruta and Roger are then going to, along with the other panellists, field questions. Now this is an experimental session and it will only work if you ask these eminent panellists questions. Now I'm going to ask some questions after that to get them going, because that's my job. But we do need, for example, questions about one of our leading editors. Why hasn't he printed your news that you've refurbished 7 bedrooms? Or, your 3 meeting rooms have got new projection equipment. Well, he wouldn't publish that sort of news, but you get my drift. Okay, Sally, do you want to say a few more words from following on your presentation or not?
Well, I'd like to follow on from what you've just been explaining. The figures that Paul has been quoting, those countries that have been able to do the economic impact studies that he's referred to. What I think is really exciting about the meetings industry is not necessarily just that spend, the spend that it is by the delegates in those cities, but actually the contribution that what's taking place at the meetings is contributing to the economy and industry in that city and country. So if you consider at an exhibition the deals that are being done, the trade that takes place, can be many millions of dollars more than what Paul was quoting of the direct spend of the visitors being in a hotel, being in the restaurants, being in the shops. That's not necessarily as quantifiable as the figures that we have for those countries used as examples, but to me it's much more important. All those meetings, conferences, exhibitions and events of different types that are taking place are actually creating a much more important contribution to the country's economy by the deals being done, by the knowledge being gained, the education that's taking place, and the trade, particularly international, if you're gaining more investment into your country. And studies that were done in recent years suggest that the payback for every euro that you spend marketing to the meetings industry is 13 or 14 to 1 in economic impact that you will get back through this added trade and development in your city and country. And some of the other factors are ones that I referred to in my presentation. It's not just about the direct spend of the visitor, but the ongoing benefit that they will create to you as the person that lives in that city. They create a city that's a much more attractive place. Estonia, and forgive me again, but it's the one I know the most about and very excited about, has been identified in the country brand index as one of the countries to watch in the future. It will really have the opportunity to go up the rankings of those countries that are a very exciting place to live, work and study. It's done on a whole different criteria of culture and the quality of life and very different things to what we're talking about that matter for the meetings industry. But I think all of you are in a similar position to Estonia in being able to take that forward and have the wider benefit to all of your local population. It's not just about, sometimes, I'm sure you will have found this, particularly in the last 6 months here in Vilnius, when you've had all of these EU visitors, meaning that sometimes the roads were blocked and there were cavalcades of, long limousines bringing people into the city. there can be an inclination for your local population to think, what a nuisance, another meeting taking place here. I can't get down this street, or I can't park here, or whatever. I've had major destinations that I work with saying to me, but we don't want those conferences, they're a nuisance, and they mean that I can't do this and I can't do that. But when you consider the really wide economic impact and benefit they bring to the city and country, you can then get across those messages to your local population and take them with you as really being on side and benefiting from it overall.
Okay, and I know Roger wanted to come in
just
at one point.
Yeah, we call this the exponential development. You know, every investment got a curve, starting in the top and it's go downhill again. But looking at meetings, you got an exponential development curve going upwards, because it will take maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, or even 10 years from that particular meeting before it really happens. That wouldn't have happened without this meeting. And that's what I think we have to explain to these people saying, oh, no, don't come here because we don't need you, it's the traffic and all this. Well, I say so. If you're not a member of ICA, become a member of ICA before you leave this session. Because if I put together Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Iceland in the ICA statistics, we are number 2 in the world, just after United States. But long before, we are bigger than Germany, and we are only 25 million people. And I say, do the same with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Put your figures together and tell the world, this is how we are growing. Look back 5 or 10 years, if you have figures for you know, I don't know that. But this is how the world looks at you. As the people looks at Scandinavia, we are not the same, for God's sake. The Finnish and the Swedish and the Danish were very different people, but we call them Scandinavia. Do this, the world will look upon you in exactly the same way. This is the Baltic region. Put your figures together and suddenly, wow, we are going in the right direction.
You can always trust a journalist to create a sensational story from some facts, can't you? But of course, journalists and publishers like data, and it's around the data that they write stories. They write their articles. And that's a very important message which the editors that we have with us over the next 3 days, Roger, Marcel from Headquarters Magazine at the back, wave Marcel, he has very firm opinions about destination messaging and venue messaging. He's also a specialist in the International World of Associations because he publishes a magazine specific for that. Journalists love stories, but they love figures to hang it on. Okay, I'm going to ask Pernilla to talk about why, as a member of Parliament, she believes that her fellow parliamentarians and civil servants should listen to why we believe we're important, but also how, perhaps, Pernilla, we need to give you the information. Because politicians, if I can say that, she's a very close personal friend, I can say this, will not get off their backsides and find the information themselves, largely. They require the information to be given to them because they want to champion the progress. Not that I'm a cynic about politicians. And Pernilla, over to you.
Okay. Thank you for bringing me here and to this interesting conference and exhibition. It's.
Can everybody hear Pernilla?
Should I stop? Well, I can put it a bit higher. As Paul said, I've been cheating death a few times in my life, so why in the world would I care about politics then? I could do something better with my life, couldn't I? Well, for me, politics is very important to create opportunities for people. And for me especially, I believe that everything that can create jobs and enterprises, it's the most important thing I believe that we can ever work with. And for me as a former meeting planner, I believe that this industry, the meetings industry, is really an industry for the future. because everyone attends meetings sometimes, and everyone like good planned meetings, but it doesn't come by itself. You need to have professional meeting planners, you need education for these meeting planners, you need to know the difference between tourism and the meetings industry, and that you have to tell the politicians. What's the difference between this industry, your profession, being a planner or a supplier, what's the difference between that and just have a tourism activity and been working within ordinary tourism? And I believe that many people they're not aware about the difference. So that's the first thing you need to tell politicians in your country or in your city. Otherwise, they can't provide you with these necessary things that Sally told us about, and which I certainly underline, because you're always in the need of good infrastructure, good education, as I mentioned, and you're also in the need of sometimes money to create convention bureaus or other things that really can, see to make it possible to create meetings overall. And of course, politicians love figures and statistics. So you really have to prove why this industry is important for you and for your company or for the city or the country. So I think the better you are to provide us politicians with that, the better results you will get.
Thank you. Interestingly, in Sweden, with the creation of Swedish Meetings Week and the Politicians Forum, the fact that Pernilla has written a debating paper for the Swedish government, and they're about to conduct their own economic impact study, if I understand, actually, as a platform for debate, that's a very healthy, relative to many countries, that's a very healthy position to be in. Okay, let me start with some questions for the panel, and any member of the panel, please chime in. Or once I've asked the half a dozen questions I've got, we'll throw it open to the floor, or panel, come in, and Ruta, you can subsequently give us a Lithuanian economist perspective as a free marketeer, so that's going to be very interesting. I've had the privilege of spending quite a lot of time here in the last 2 years. I think this is my 12th or 13th visit to Lithuania in just over 2 years, in fact in 25 months. And I've met a number of the local educationalists, particularly in higher education, but there is no event management undergraduate program. Certainly the discussion about the importance of business tourism doesn't feature very highly when I meet academics here. Is there a role for event management and business tourism to be taught at university level in the Baltics? Anybody?
Yeah, I believe it's a need of education in higher levels for meeting.
You're going to have to speak into your mic. It's gone down again.
I think there is a need of really to see that meeting planning is a profession, and that's why you also need an education on higher level and universities all over Europe, not only in the Baltic states. We've been trying, Roger and I, for some years in Sweden to really have it acknowledged as a profession, and we're on our way, I believe, but it's still, I mean, in the US they have had the certification for meeting planners for many years.
Nearly 30 years.
And the PI, Meeting Professionals International, they have a certification within meeting management. But I believe it should really be acknowledged as a profession that really is something to be proud of. Meetings doesn't happen by itself. It's really, it's necessary with good planning, good economic knowledge and so on. So, yes.
Good. Ruta, you're on the university board, so
yes,
give us a Lithuanian perspective.
I can only contribute and inspire you to search what is good. how can we contribute to the businesses and not complain what is bad, because so many complainers and that's not very constructive. So what is good in our countries, I think that social sciences as such are very popular. So we have so many people, so many students with social diplomas and who cannot find their jobs, their places. And here you are. Please come join. I would be rather skeptical if, for example, we would come up with a proposal that we should design a bachelor program for the conference tourism. It's too narrow probably, but of course it can be integrated into current social sciences program, which are abundant, at least in Lithuania and in all three Baltic states.
Okay, could I just pause there? I'm intrigued about that, because most of the event management courses and business tourism courses in universities throughout Europe sit within the business school. They don't sit within the traditional social science curriculum. They sit squarely in the business school. And that includes one of my own daughters looking at business tourism at master's degree level as part of her marketing master's degree. They actually did some work on it about brand development of this growing economic sector. Why would a country, any country, if generally between 2 and 3% of GDP was in a particular sector, not want to include something in higher education about the added value and the learned base of that work?
It's all about competition. It's not about the country, it's about universities. Okay. It's about colleges that are competing. Okay. Now for students in Lithuania, at least, we have voucher system when the student can bring his voucher, if he is a good student, to the program, to the bachelor master's degree program, selected by the student, by parents, of course. And that creates competition, and that creates demand and supply. I believe that evolution, we do not expect revolution, of course, is good when it goes bottom up. I'm very skeptical, for example, if we see the mayor or the prime minister or the president coming to the floor and saying, let's be the country of conferences. We once was the country of agriculture. That's enough. That's enough of that official design. Let's give people the chance to choose. And I think that we have the very good chance here because, look at least at Lithuanians, they are very much afraid of, sorry for the word, dirty businesses. No chemistry, everything is prohibited, no new plants, so let's protect our green country. So here you are, value-creating industry. So if we, for example, if we come up with the comparisons, which industry creates more jobs and creates a longer chain of jobs and added money? Yes. So we will have not only vertical but horizontal competition with road constructors, renovators, and other industries. So we should stress where we are unique. And unique we are that we are, so to say, clean and intellectual and adding value, which is now very popular.
Yeah. I'm going to be really controversial. Some of the audience will know I think the most overused word in any language is the word unique, because I don't think it has a meaning, if I'm honest. But it does sound to me that here in Lithuania, what we've got to do to help the competitive nature of the university sector is make them even more appealing about trying to capture the opportunity of having some educational base for a new creative industry or a new business sector. Because I'm looking around this room, how many people in the room are not from Lithuania? Can you just indicate? So about a quarter at maximum. Well, the remaining 75% is more people than attended this session for in the whole of last year. So what that's telling me is that more people are understanding that CONVENE is helping to create a business community called meetings and events, because that was the design. CONVENE exists to accelerate the brand recognition of what the Baltic region has to offer to the world of international business and events. And a byproduct is about creating a sense of business community amongst those Lithuanians working and helping to create business meetings and events of all types. Okay, Roger.
Yes. How many universities do you got in this country?
40.
40.
40 for a population of?
3 million.
You got one each, almost.
Yeah, so...
But...
Together with the high school. I mean, not only universities, but higher
same in
education.
Sweden, universities and high school, yes. And do you know if any one of them has a strategy for meetings, a meeting strategy?
Not as far as I know. I did some...
Because this is what we are trying to do in Sweden, in creating for all universities. We have put together a network of 33 out of 44 universities and high schools. And inside the Meeting Industry Week, discussing how to use a meeting strategy. Why should they use a meeting strategy? Because that's how you develop the university. Bring meetings to your university, to your cities. And if you don't understand that when you are the CEO or whatever you are, nothing will happen. And suddenly, in 3 years' time, we have gone from 4 convention bureaus to 24 convention bureaus in Sweden, depending on this question.
Based on the university acting partly as the hub to attract meetings and conferences to that city, but also, coming back to Sally's point, acting as the champions for using meetings and events to generate knowledge transfer and intellectual expertise in the universities. And I have to tell you, this is what normally happens around the world. So many meetings and conferences take place on university campuses, but because they're a scientific base, medical base, social science base, the science that we've both studied, the dismal science called economics, which strangely enough was in my social science faculty rather than the business faculty. In those days it was in the social sciences. Okay, another questions. This area, this region, and I'm now being quite controversial to some of you, is a largely undiscovered region for the world of international meetings and events, compared with, say, Paris, some parts of Germany, even Copenhagen, which has been remarkable in the way that it's positioned itself to earn international meetings and events. And the Danes use issues of their commitment to cutting-edge design and sustainability, 2 of the subjects that they keep champion about the way to bring in meeting events. But how can emerging destinations articulate to policymakers of all types, politicians, big business men and women, leading educators, all these people are influencers and policy makers. How can we get across? Let's grasp this political opportunity with a small p. It's also political with a big P, because political parties compete just like Lithuanian universities, I now realise. Your mayor, the mayor of this city, has been a champion already. Last year, he felt that the connectivity of the country needed a boost. So whether politically you agree with him or not, you now have a national airline relaunched. He actually is one of those, I think, that believes it will never be a major profit centre, but actually as an economic multiplier, it's incredibly important. Because of your relatively low population base, it's never going to be a Frankfurt or a London or a Milan in that sense. But nevertheless, for our world, you need the connectivity. How can we articulate how important we are to people like you? What do you want us to tell you here in the Baltic states so you can have the debate you're having in the Swedish Parliament, in the Estonian Parliament, or the Latvian Parliament, or here in Lithuania?
Why people should go here? Why people should go here and have meetings? Well, I was here last year with the Labour Market Committee from Parliament in Sweden, and we stayed then at the Novotel, and we visited the SEMA, and we had dinners and restaurants and so on. I think we created some money.
There's some economic benefit.
Economic benefit for for this city. And I believe that the most important thing to explain to why some people, any kind, should come and have meetings in your country is to really prove what you have to offer. And I once again underline what Sally said before, because if you can really think of what comes first to your mind about your city or your country and really market that to other people, I think that's the best thing, because it comes from the heart. And of course, you need to say also that it's a safe city. For both companies and politicians, today safety is very, very important. I believe that every time, at least I am going somewhere, I have to tell where I'm going. And I believe that it has become more and more usual also for people in higher administration and also in corporations.
That's right. It's part of a business continuity plan, effectively, that increasingly executives and politicians have to let their back office know, or their office know where they're going to go, because, believe it or not, in public life, you now have to do things like risk assessments about whether the trip is okay, and that's particularly the case for politicians. I remember being on holiday in Budapest for a city break last year, and the German foreign minister was visiting the same hotel. And I think the Budapest economy benefited greatly, because for one politician, there must have been 70 in his delegation, of which about 20 were armed guards. And it was an astonishing impact. But whilst I was there in Budapest, which again has managed to create itself incredible demand for meetings and events without having an international convention centre of any quality whatsoever, they had the World Jewish Council meeting. 4,000 delegates in the city. That was almost on lockdown because of the security, both of the German foreign minister, who wasn't at that conference, but of the World Jewish Council. But the city was packed during the week. Then at the weekend, it got packed with tourists. So what Sally was saying, one of the benefits of the meetings industry is it sits alongside the tourism industry, which it is not part of. Now, you may disagree with that statement, but most of us that spend our lives doing plans and consultancies and political statements would argue, and Roger would argue very clearly, it involves visitors, but the purpose of the visit is not tourism. Okay, I'd like to pause and now throw open the floor. Now, this is the really experimental bit, because if you don't ask any questions of an economist, of a journalist, of a politician, and an event producer who now is a leading venue and destination consultant, it's your fault. So we have some mics around. We got Santa's helpers. There's a mic up there. We've got another one somewhere in the room. Do we have more than one mic? Will someone answer me? Just one? Two. Sorry, you merged into the curtain at the back. I do apologise. Okay. Now, there is a rule in the House. There are no stupid questions. All questions are valid. Only some answers are stupid. So no pressure on the panel here. Are there any questions for any one of the panel? If you've got a question, please stand up, identify yourself and what you do. So the first question is coming from our Belgian guest, Marcel. Stand up, Marcel, and introduce yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Marcel Vissers. I am the editor-in-chief of Headquarters magazine. It's a European Association magazine, and MIM, it's a European corporate magazine. We are talking about the Baltic Sea region.
Yep.
I think in the middle of Middle Europe and in the south of Europe, these countries are not so well known. Not many magazines are writing about these countries. I have a general question. These three countries, what do they have in common, or how different are they?
Could you repeat the question, because I didn't quite hear it?
the three countries from the Baltic Sea region,
Okay.
how different are they from each other?
Okay.
Or how equal are they?
Okay. Well, I'm first of all going to do a bit of factual correction. The Baltic Sea region is beyond the three Baltic states, as we regard the three countries of the Baltic states. CONVENE has 8 countries exhibiting, and technically could have 10 if Denmark and Germany were here. We didn't invite the Germans because it's such a big market. They sort of would dominate the exhibiting world. The Danes will be visiting with a view to exhibiting next year. But, okay, how different? Now, we've got a Lithuanian on the panel, so our Lithuanian panellists, how different do you think the three Baltic states are?
Very much different.
And how different
and we are happy to have competitors. And look, Estonia always going in front of us and always looking. It's good to have someone's back to look at and to follow. We have in common only our Soviet history, I would say. Soviet Union united us. In all other respects, we are different, culture, religion, language, even Latvian. We come from the same Indo-European roots, but we cannot understand each other. Estonians are...
Okay, so Lithuanians can't understand
Finland,
Latvians.
Latvians with the Russians, and we probably with Poles.
Okay, I'm now going to ask a Latvian and an Estonian for their definition of why they're different. Can we have a mic, young lady? Can we have a mic here, please? Ladies first. So let's ask an Estonian what she believes the differences are, generally speaking, in the world of meetings and events. Let's not get down to too much sociological definition here. So how are the countries different in terms of meetings and events? Kadri.
Thank you. I would say Estonia is the boutique one of the three. We are the smallest, with the smallest population, with the smallest infrastructure, so we need to run maybe faster than our bigger neighbors.
It's very funny where I'm standing. Kadri, who is the head of the Estonian Convention Bureau, is looking at Igers, who looks after the Riga Convention Bureau, for approval with what she's saying here. Don't worry about him.
Trying to
He's bigger than you. Don't worry about him.
Yes, this is my opinion, that what is the difference? Of course, the cultural difference is the atmosphere. It's three different products that we
I'm
have.
going to ask you another question while I've got you standing up. What's the difference between Estonia and Tallinn?
Here I would say I must agree with you that in Estonia, the main conference city, it is Tallinn, no doubt about it. But when we think about returning business, especially the association, the scientific sector, then I believe in all of our countries, it's not only the capital, it's where the potential ambassadors are. So we should never forget our secondary cities, the smaller places, to attract repeat business and hire ambassadors from all over the country.
Thank you for that, because we will see during the CONVENE exhibition over the next few days, one of the challenges here in Lithuania is how we cascade the international business coming in outside of the capital city. Igers, give us a Latvian perspective on the differences between the three Baltic states.
Yes, my name is Igors Smiltens, and I'm from Meet Riga, Riga's City Tourism Development Bureau, and thank you, Paul, for introduction. Generally, I think our history, if we are talking about history of over three Baltic countries, has started to become different after First World War time, when we are getting our independences. So we are started to develop in a little bit different way from country to country, and we also had a little bit different focus on where we are going. Yes, Soviet Union was sort of a uniting point, but then again, as soon as we'll get independence, back in 1991, we again was a little bit different. And to a little bit show a history how the meeting industry developed in our countries, I would say it's only started on last 10 years. So we are rather new in the industry, and therefore not so many knew about us as a meeting industry destination. How we are different? Yes, we are. Not only languages, but also how we are doing the things, how we are doing the business. Not a secret that Latvia had a long history with Germans, and I think, sorry to say, but I disagree that we are going to Russia way. We are going more to Scandinavia way or German way, and that's what Latvians are, how are Latvians and are doing business mostly. And if you are talking about Estonia, then Estonians are heading to Finnish way to do the business, I think, and with their own twist. So in Lithuania is doing own way, I would say, and how they're doing the business. So this is how we are going ahead and how we are doing the businesses and how we are different.
Okay, thanks, Igors, very much. If Estonia is the boutique offer, which of the 3 Baltic states is a department store? Or has an a la carte menu rather than a boutique menu? Latvia. What about, come on, Jolanta, you know, you've had your two friends and colleagues talk about their Lithuanian, their Baltic countries. Why don't we get you to talk about what you think the difference between the countries are from a Lithuanian perspective, just to give you a chance to beat your 2 friends up, really. We got the mic again. So, in a couple of short sentences, what's the difference, Jolanta? Do you want to stand on the chair and shout?
It works. Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. We have a lot of similarities and we have a lot of differences. I would say Lithuania is less known country if I compare Lithuania with Latvia and Estonia. And this became at the moment our biggest advantage because we invested less money to market our country than our neighboring countries. So, but finally, culturally, mentally, we are quite similar. Like Igors was telling, we are always thinking, so who we are? We belong to Eastern Europe, to the Central Europe, or to Scandinavia. And I like the idea of Sally Greenhill that we are somehow Baltics with the Scandinavian mentality and Scandinavian way of living, of thinking and doing business. It means we try to be very precise, we try to reach the quality, we try to keep the quality, not to look for quantity and for big numbers. It means we don't have possibility to accommodate big events in the city, but we are able to deliver the quality. And I think my neighboring countries, my neighboring cities and friends, they are going to work the same way.
Okay, thank you for being brief. I'm going to ask Sally to remember back before she worked for Estonia to give us a Western European perspective about what she believed the differences between the 3 countries from a meetings and events industry perspective, which is what today's about. She wasn't expecting that question.
I think, personally, and I can speak for a lot of the meetings industry, before I knew some of the things that I know today, I would have collectively put them along Eastern Europe. So alongside Poland and some of the other former Soviet countries. And so the competition was even wider then, and what I've learnt is how much more they resemble the Scandinavian way of life.
Okay. Right, any other questions from the floor? I think, was there one down here? Did I see? Your chance to talk to international experts here, folks. If you don't want to talk to them, we can break for lunch. I'm very happy about that.
You can talk to us during lunch as well.
Of course, yeah.
Well, they're here for several days, and so at the very least, grab them during CONVENE. Does your world matter? The headline is the significance of our world, our world of business. Whenever I get silence at these events, I always think that the audience doesn't feel there's any significance whatsoever and it's just a job. Okay, straw poll, how many of you work in the meetings and industry because it's a job? Okay, so that would suggest to me that you think there's more to it than just being a job. Because if you, say, work for the AIM Group, who are a PCO, part of a very well-known and very respected international group of companies across the world, they don't work 9 to 5 when they're doing an event. They might work 6 a.m. to midnight, several days in a row. That doesn't sound like a job to me. That sounds like a prison sentence. So there must be more to it while you work in the industry. It's a bit unfair that I picked on you, but you're one of the few people in the audience I know quite well, so tough. So why are you sitting here in this session? You've not got a question for our audience? I did tell you I'd pick on you one of these days. Okay. When I briefed the panelists, and I have the brief in my hand, I'm going to say, I said, it may take quite a lot of effort to get audience participation, having experience presenting in Lithuania on a number of occasions. So if you haven't got questions now, can I implore you to stop these people during the next 2 days and strike up a conversation?
Please do.
We have a politician who is not scary. We have a consultant that gives freely of her time to come along to talk about her experiences around the world, and she's worked in Russia and all over the place in Europe. We've got a publisher who, if I was a supplier in the room, I would, relatively speaking, be making love to, because I would want to get coverage in his magazine. And you've got someone from a Lithuanian economist and someone from the university who could be one of my industry champions, who was an advisor to the mayor. That would tell me I want to get to know her, because I want to convince her, because she moves some of the time in those circles up there that most of us don't get time. If I think my world is important, talk to Ruta. I would. She'd be one of those people that I would have as my ambassador to the world of meetings and events, because she will be able to help navigate the way through some of the corridors of influence. That's true. It is true.